Before I tell you this story, I want you to know one thing. I am not a bitter person. I didn't set out to cut my family off. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't sit in a hospital room and think about revenge. I thought about survival. And when you're focused on surviving, really surviving, the kind where you don't know if next month looks anything like this month, you find out very quickly who shows up and who doesn't. My family didn't show up. Not my parents, not my brother, not my sister. The people who had eaten at my table, borrowed my money, called me the responsible one for as long as I can remember, they disappeared when I needed them most. And here's the part they didn't see coming. I got better. Not just physically, I got clearer, stronger, more certain of who I was and what I would accept. And 2 years after the worst moment of my life, my brother called on a Tuesday afternoon. He needed money. What happened next is what this story is about. The last time I saw my brother before the diagnosis, we were arguing about who would pick up the tab at dinner. He won. He always won. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a hospital room being told I had a condition that would change everything. My mobility, my independence, my ability to work. The doctor used words I had to look up on my phone afterward. I wrote them down in the notes app, one by one, because I needed them to be real somewhere outside my own head. I called my family that night. By the end of the following month, I was alone. Let me tell you who I was before this happened. I was 31 years old, I had a good job, project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, the kind of role I had worked toward for 8 years. I owned my apartment, I had savings. I was, by every external measure, the most stable person in my family. My parents had leaned on me financially for years, not dramatically, not in a way anyone would have called a crisis, but consistently. A loan here, a bill there, help with the car, help with the heating. I gave it, without resentment, because that's what you do, and because I could, and because they were my parents. My brother Marcus lived 20 minutes away. We had dinner most weeks. He was one of those people who fills a room. Loud, funny, the kind of person strangers remember. My sister Dana lived further out, but we spoke regularly. She was the one who always said, "We're so proud of you" at family events, the sentence that lands differently when you realize it was conditional. This was my family, the people who knew me. Then I got sick. The condition is called ankylosing spondylitis, a chronic inflammatory disease that affects the spine. In my case, it progressed faster than typical. Within 4 months of diagnosis, I was in significant pain daily. Within 6 months, I had taken medical leave from work. Within 8 months, I had burned through most of my savings on treatment, adjustments to my apartment, and the 1,000 invisible costs of being ill that nobody accounts for until they're living it. During those 8 months, my family was present, in the way that people are present when they're deciding how present they want to be. My mother called every few days at first, then every few weeks, then on my birthday, and at Christmas, and when she needed something. My brother visited once, in month 2, before things got visibly worse. He sat in my living room for 40 minutes, told me to stay positive, and left to meet friends. My sister sent a card, an actual card, with a stamp, which I suppose was something. When I asked Marcus if he could help me get to a specialist appointment, just drive me 40 minutes each way, he said he had something going on that day. I didn't ask again. When I asked my parents if I could stay with them temporarily while I figured out my living situation, my mother said they didn't have the space. They have a 3-bedroom house. They live alone. I stopped asking. I hired a part-time aide with the last of my savings. I restructured my life around what I could do alone. I found a chronic illness community online, strangers who understood the specific exhaustion of being sick and invisible simultaneously, and I went quiet with my family. Not dramatically, no confrontation, no final speech, I just stopped reaching out. Stopped answering calls that came less and less frequently anyway. Stopped making myself available to people who had made themselves unavailable to me. I didn't call it anything, I just survived. 14 months after my diagnosis, something shifted. A new treatment protocol. A specialist who actually listened. Slow, incremental improvement, not a cure, not a return to before, but a stabilization that allowed me to think beyond the next week. I went back to work part-time, then full-time. Different company, different role, but I was back. I restructured my finances. I started rebuilding. I didn't tell my family. Not out of strategy, not as revenge. I simply had nothing to say to people who had said nothing when it mattered. 22 months after the diagnosis, I got a promotion. Senior project manager. The salary was more than I had ever made. I still didn't tell my family. My brother called on a Tuesday in March. Not my birthday. Not Christmas. A random Tuesday. He needed money. Not a small amount. He was behind on his mortgage, his wife had reduced her hours after their second child, and things had gotten tight. He was calling because I was the responsible one. His words. The responsible one. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment, then I said, very calmly, I can't help you right now, Marcus. He pushed back. He reminded me of things he had done for me years ago, favors I had long since returned. He said family helps family. I agree, I said. Family helps family. There was a pause. I have to go, I said, and I hung up. 2 days later, my mother called. Marcus had told her about our conversation. She was upset, not at him for what he'd needed, but at me for what I hadn't given. I let her finish. Then I said, do you remember when I asked if I could stay with you, when I couldn't work and couldn't afford my aid? Silence. You said you didn't have the space. More silence. I don't have the space right now either, I said. I hope things work out for Marcus. And I ended the call. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because I think people expect a dramatic resolution and the truth is quieter than that. My sister reached out 2 weeks later. She was the first person to say the word sorry. Not a full accounting, not the conversation I'd once imagined, but a genuine acknowledgement that they had not shown up. We have spoken a few times since. It's careful, slow, nothing like before. But it's something. My brother took longer. His mortgage situation resolved without my help. I don't know exactly how. He called 6 months after our conversation and said, awkwardly, that he thought he could have been there more. I said, I agreed. We have had dinner once. It was strange and a little sad, and also somehow, a beginning. My parents are the hardest. My mother struggles to apologize for anything that requires her to have been wrong. We speak occasionally. I have accepted that this is probably what it will be. What I have not done is pretend. I don't perform closeness I don't feel. I don't show up out of obligation to people who treated obligation as optional when I needed them most. I am polite. I am civil. I am done being the person who gives more than they receive and calls it love. Here's what 2 years of illness taught me that I didn't expect. You find out who people are not in the good moments but in the inconvenient ones, when loving you requires something from them, when showing up has a cost. That's the test. Most people don't even realize they're taking it. My family failed that test, and here's the part they didn't anticipate. I got better. Not just physically, I got clearer. About what I would accept, about who had earned access to my life, about the difference between family by blood and family by choice. I didn't plan to cut them off. I didn't plan to make them regret anything. I just focused on surviving, and then on rebuilding. And somewhere in that process, the space between us became permanent. They came back when I had something to offer again. Karma didn't arrive loudly. It arrived in the form of a Tuesday phone call, and a very simple word, no.